Man muss die Triller mit allen Fingern fleißig üben. Die letztern werden hierdurch stark und fertig. Indessen wird niemand es dahin bringen, dass mit allen Fingern gleich gut trillern lernt, weil durch die Sachen, die man spielt, schon mehr Triller bei gewissen Fingern vorkommen. Folglich werden diese unvermerkt vorzüglich geübt. Und weil auch selbst in die Finger ein Unterschied von der Natur gelegt ist. Indessen kommen doch zuweilen auszuhaltende Triller in den äußersten Stimmen vor, wobei man nicht das Auslesen von Fingern hat, weil unterdessen die anderen Stimmen ihre eigene Bewegung behalten. Außerdem werden auch gewisse Gedanken sehr schwer herauszubringen sein, wenn man nicht sogar die kleinen Finger fleißig trillern lässt. Zum Exempel Figur 25. All these paragraphs are connected, all of them. And so when you make, if you think of a jigsaw, and I always talk about jigsaws, but they're quite useful when it comes to, as a useful analogy when it comes to learning and gaining insight and being intelligent, escaping Lilliput, escaping the cage. All these, and if you think of a jigsaw, when you look at a piece of a jigsaw, there's a bit of a picture there. And that can represent a piece of information. And you'll see the picture, and you'll see what it is. You'll see the picture on that jigsaw piece. And that's that piece of information. So you'll think, when you've no conception that one can connect pieces of information to create a bigger picture, you'll think you'll know what it is you're looking at. Like when you look at a piece of a jigsaw, and if you've no conception that jigsaw piece fits into the other pieces and creates a bigger picture, you'll think what it is you're looking at. But then, with a jigsaw, when you put that piece where it belongs, it might have looked, you wouldn't exactly be able to tell what it was, except that it's that jigsaw piece. But when you put it into the jigsaw, you might suddenly realize, oh, that's part of a letterbox, or that's a bit of the nose. That's what happens when you connect the pieces of a jigsaw together, even though each of them has their own tiny little picture or image. When you connect all the pieces together, they create a bigger picture. And all the pieces of information are connected the same, and the picture you are creating or that's revealing itself to you is the same picture that a jigsaw will reveal to you when all the pieces are put together. So everything Bach says in each chapter, they're not individual pieces of information, they're all connected. So Bach, when he says one must practice diligently the trills with all fingers, that is connected to the previous chapter. So he is saying one must practice the trills like he said to practice them. So not lifting up the fingers too high, starting off slowly and always getting faster, but always evenly, always playing evenly, and not forcing it. And he says the same about practicing fast passages. And he says those who try and force it, he guarantees that they will never achieve the results that doing it his way will achieve. So that's what he is saying here. That is how he wants, when he says one must practice the trills diligently with all fingers, that is connected to how he says to do that. And then the next thing he says, so remember the Lilliput professor told you to ignore Bach because finger strength was not an issue back then. And the Lilliput professor will tell you he's saying something different because he's interested in your finger strength. He has only your best interests at heart. And finger strength wasn't an issue back then. So Bach was an idiot. Don't listen to him. Listen to me. And what does Bach say you'll get? Doing it his way. And Bach does not know about the Lilliput professor in 2023. And he doesn't know what the Lilliput professor will say. And he doesn't know that grand pianos are going to be used as an excuse why everything he says is irrelevant and everything they say is completely relevant. So he doesn't know that. And yet, what does he say you'll achieve? What is the first word he says you'll achieve when you practice the trills like he says? That the fingers are going to be, the first thing he says, they are going to be strong. Strong. And dexterous. So there you can know as well what Bach is ultimately, first and foremost, he's talking about himself there, because that is the only person he can really talk about with authority. So you know for 100% certainty that Bach's experience of his own fingers, the first thing he'll think of when he thinks of his own fingers playing the piano or whatever keyboard instrument it was, is that they are strong. Strength is the first thing that he'll experience. You know that Bach's fingers were strong and dexterous. And that is why he's telling you your fingers will be strong and dexterous, because his fingers are strong and dexterous. And the reality inspires the words. If you think of a science fiction writer who's never been to Mars and they're describing Mars in a novel, they might describe Mars as cold and lonely. And they might have picked those words because they think they're the best words to describe Mars, because they're evocative and they paint the picture he once painted. Whereas, let's imagine somebody who's actually been to Mars. They might describe Mars as being dry and itchy. And why do they say dry and itchy? It's not because they think dry and itchy are better words than cold and lonely. They are saying dry and itchy, or let's say itchy, because the reality inspired, the itchiness on Mars inspired them using the word itchy to describe it. It wasn't because they thought it was the best possible word to describe Mars. It belonged to the reality. And again, Bach did not know what Lilliput is going to be saying in the future. He was not thinking, okay, I know what they're going to say, so I'm going to say strong just to show them up, just to show that they haven't got a clue what they're talking about. He didn't know that. He said strength because strength was present. Strength was, the reality inspired Bach to use the word strength. Otherwise, he never would have taught it. And if Bach had said to you to lift a feather every day, what he'd say, would you get out of that? He's not going to say strength. It would never occur to him to say strength, that you're going to get strength from lifting a feather. What he might say is you'll get, gentleness and control of your movements or something. But he'd never say strength because strength is not involved. And he says strength here because strength is actually involved. It's one of the predominant things one gets from that one notices, that one has. This is the predominant thing that Bach has had is strength of his fingers. So where does that leave the argument of the Lilliput professor who told you that finger strength wasn't an issue back then? That only came with modern grand pianos. It shows them up completely. It completely undermines that argument. And it shows just how you've been cheated if you're told to ignore this and listen to them. There is no way Bach would think in 100 years if finger strength was not an issue back then. There is no way Bach would mention it. And there is it's even more unlikely he would mention that as the very first thing if it wasn't the predominant element present at the time and present in his own playing and his own fingers. Strength and dexterity is what you will achieve. And not just playing the trills, but achieve learning, practicing the fast passages his way, not forcing it with the metronome. And then he says, okay, the next bit he says is, nobody's going to get to the point where they're able to, where they'll learn to trill with all the fingers equally good. And that's, they're basically all the time, everything Bach says shows me he's not in Lilliput. That Bach is a giant, he is outside of the cage. And he acknowledges that this is evidence that he's not in the cage, that he's not in Lilliput, because he sees the reality. He sees nature and he sees that nobody's ever going to get to the point where they can trill with all fingers equally good. And you can see as well how wrong that is from Lilliput. Lilliput will tell you the opposite. Lilliput will tell you, why are you doing finger exercises? What's the goal? And in reality, they have no clue what the goal is, because it's like with the layers of the onion. You only see the next problem once that layer is removed. But if you create a layer of an onion that doesn't even exist, you'll never have to deal with what comes after, because you're never going to actually be able to peel back that layer of the onion. It'll be an impossibility. You'll be going around in that rectangle till you die, just treading the same things over and over again all the time. And you will never find out what then after the finger exercises work, after all the metronome stuff works. And you can see I have presented in actually a specific example how the metronome denies you. Of course, you'll have to assume that Bach wasn't an idiot. And you would have to entertain the possibility that what Bach shared was the actual secret of how to successfully perform a clear and crisp Nachschlag. But you can see how the metronome actually prevents you from leaving that circle or rectangle you're walking in the cage. So they tell you the goal of the finger exercises is so that you achieve complete finger independence. And I said I don't believe in finger independence, but I'll say that if you hear a terrible piano player where none of the fingers are together, where everything is all over the place, where the one finger doesn't know what the other finger is doing. That is, you are looking at somebody with complete finger independence. Anybody who can't play the piano at all has complete finger independence, because that's what happens when one finger doesn't know what the other, or care, when one finger doesn't care what the other finger is doing. They'll all do their own thing, and totally regardless of what the other fingers are doing, and it'll sound, and there'll be no rhythm, there'll be no synchronization, no nothing, because all fingers are going off in all directions doing what they like. That is complete finger independence. So they say your goal is complete finger independence, and you should be able to, this is another thing, you should be able to trill equally well with all fingers. That'll be the goal. When you do the finger exercises properly, that's what you'll achieve. That's what you should be achieving. So that's what you're running after, and that doesn't even exist in reality. So when you're walking that rectangle, and you hear what I have read about what Bach says, and I'm telling you what it is that Bach is telling you and the significance of it, and you stop for a second and you start to look possibly outside the cage. Your teacher, your Lilliput professor, sitting there on his deck chair and margarita, which he's enjoying, his bit of luxury in the cage, is you're providing that for them. They don't, that makes their cage life bearable, is the little bit of luxury you're providing them. And the last thing they want, the worst thing about people in the cage is that they need you to be in the cage with them. Otherwise, they'll hate the cage. And it's the deck chair and the margarita that makes the cage bearable. And you're the one who makes those things possible for them. So they want to keep you in the cage. You stop for a second and start to look out away from the rectangle your professor's having you walk. You look outside the cage and you say, what about that? And then not only will the professor tell you, no, don't look there, look here, this is irrelevant for you. They'll as well create something, because there is nothing in the cage. So the only things that are created are things that don't even exist. They'll focus your attention on a mirage, an illusion, a delusion, something that's fictional. And they'll say, don't look there, strive for that. A fictional idea in the cage that you will never, it's like a carrot dangled in front of you, that you'll never actually reach. No matter how far you walk, it'll always be the same distance in front of you. That is what they are telling you to focus on. And so you can follow that rectangle till the day you die, and you will never achieve that. And that's the greatness of Bach, that he does not support that lie that what you are striving for is to be able to trill equally good with all fingers, complete finger independence. He is telling you how it actually is, how the reality is, what life outside the cage is like.